Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. Now, Europe's relentless heat wave is rapidly becoming an economic and security challenge, with Hungary imposing first-level water restrictions in almost 500 towns, Italy placing all 27 of its major cities under the highest heat alert, and nuclear power generation across Central Europe coming under pressure from shrinking rivers. Now, as governments scramble to respond, a new report warns climate change could cost Poland up to 29 billion euros every year by 2050, or around 2.2% of GDP, unless adaptation and the green transition accelerates. Now, joining us to talk about it further is Aneta Stefańczyk, Public Policy Analyst at the Reform Institute. Good to have you with us in the studio.
Thank you so much.
So it's a hot question, pardon the pun. There's this report that you've been working on. Very, very high numbers there in terms of loss, almost 29 billion euros in terms of climate change costs. That could be even more if there's inaction. So tell us how you arrived at these numbers, what this means practically for Poland.
Yeah, so overall we evaluated a few scenarios in terms of how rapidly the climate change will progress and what it means in terms of economic losses. So in the case that we continue our efforts that we have obliged ourselves to as a country, the economic loss could be curbed to 84 billion Polish zloty. But in case there is some slackness and we need to actually increase our emissions, then this number can actually accelerate to 124 billion Polish zloty. And that's annually, that's the number that is equivalent to either 1.5% GDP or 2.2% GDP, depending which scenario we land in. But the actual problem here is that these costs do not account for health costs. So what I mean by that, what we managed to calculate does not encompass the whole problems that our healthcare systems could come up with when the sort of heat waves that we are experiencing right now become more prevalent. That is because living our lives in this sort of heat has numerous effects on our health. There is a lot of studies that show that there is higher incidence of cardiovascular diseases, of respiratory diseases. There is also vector-borne diseases, so West Nile virus, or, for example, encephalitis that is borne by ticks. So these sort of diseases already have a higher incidence in Poland, actually start appearing in Poland, and they will be more prevalent when climate change accelerates. So this sort of strain on the healthcare system could be huge, but we actually cannot really calculate how much this will translate to in terms of economic losses.
Yeah, also, as you kind of mentioned, health factor here, also kind of an invisible force in a way. I mean, let's look at practically also in terms of production as well. I mean, looking at people become more irritable, they're hot, they're sweating, they're working less. It also has a kind of impact on behavior, doesn't it? So maybe you can tell us a bit more what you've found out in this, how people are affected, and maybe what steps we can take to mitigate that.
Yeah, so in preparation to our report, our conversation, we actually studied the effects on health. So maybe starting with things that we can relate to. So this higher rate of irritation, tiredness, anxiety, this also comes up in studies that higher heat affects how our brains work. That is because brains actually need 20% of the total energy that comes into our body to function well, although they only take up 2% of our body weight. So that means that they are very energy intensive. But when the heat comes, our body needs more energy to cool itself. So there is less blood with oxygen and glucose arriving at our brain. And that also means that we are under more of a stress, and the stress hormones levels increase. And that causes all sorts of problems. As I mentioned, the impact on mental health is tremendous. Tragically, this sort of worsening of mental health on population level can affect suicide rates, but also violent crime rates. That's coming as a result of higher temperatures. There is studies that say that about 1% increase in terms of temperature can cause up to 4% more of violent crime incidents. But there is also the productivity challenge that you mentioned. So I think this is something that we can all relate to in our work and education life. So our performance when we are in this very high temperature conditions also drops by about 2% with every degree above the 23 degrees Celsius temperature.
And also, I think, everyone can now say they've experienced this heat. It's one of those common denominators right now. But also how we approach that is very different, right? We have certain places that are, for instance, air-conditioned, some that are not, going in and out of different locations. I'm just trying to think, our society, look at Poland right now, wasn't necessarily in much of Europe, wasn't engineered for this kind of extreme heat. How do you see that play out in all this? Are there already steps being taken? What do you suggest right now? Is it infrastructure? Do we need more air conditioning? That is tied with energy. We need more energy. We're struggling with that at the same time. So where do you see areas with the most, let's say, improvement that can be made as quickly as possible?
Yeah, your observations are correct. This sort of climate change increased global temperatures, increased temperatures in Poland, but also higher incidence of extreme weather events. All sorts of cause all sorts of effects that need to be mitigated and that we need to adapt to on a societal level. And for now, Poland is not really well prepared to do that. So in climate change science, there are two words that come up very often. So mitigation and adaptation. Two things that we need to do as Poland, as society, is first of all mitigation. So continue to work towards lowering our greenhouse gas emissions and pressure our politicians to adopt ambitious climate policies so that we have this strategic goal implemented in our law, and so that households and enterprises feel that this is the direction that we are taking and they can take necessary investment into adaptation, into energy transition, so that we as a society become more resilient. And there is also adaptation. This is something that there is also need for adaptation, as you mentioned. And we also need government to do more, to prepare strategy, to build resilient socio-economic system. So we need investment into infrastructure, that's first of all. So to make sure that our grids are able to resist the sort of pressure that is associated with climate change, that our transportation is resilient, that our homes actually can still get energy delivered from the energy system. But we also need to adapt our cities. We need to make sure that we have enough spaces for vulnerable people who need this sort of cannot install AC in their apartments. They need to be provided with spaces where they can cool down. So that's also on this very basic level of urban development. This sort of thinking needs to be built into our policies, and we don't have it so far. So our government does not have this sort of strategy of what infrastructural investments are key, where should we put our money. This sort of thinking needs to be incorporated in every investment strategies that we have.
And just we're seeing just the image there of Budapest, and this is actually by the government that decided to actually turn off and reduce decorative non-essential lighting. So again, we see this as a very present, clear, all around us effect, trying to prioritize where the energy goes, right, in this sort of time. And that's also my question as well, because you mentioned, we're talking about the heat wave, we're talking about a lot of intense climate change, but that can also just as well be flooding, that can be extreme weather. An interesting fact here that I found out as well is in terms of the damage that's done. You said infrastructure, we're looking at roads, we're looking at loss, whatever that may be. Insurance apparently in Poland only covers about 7%, right? 7% is actually insured in terms of climate loss, or let's say effect of this. First of all, the second question then is, who pays then ultimately the bill? I mean, this is only going to increase. Do you think that will change, or who foots the bill here? Is that the taxpayer? Should that be governments? I mean, there's probably a lot of losses coming our way.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. Thank you. So actually, who foots the bill is something that depends on us. So there are a few examples of good policies that the EU put in place to make sure that polluter pays. So the industries that pollute, so that emit greenhouse gas emissions and cause this sort of increase in temperatures and put strain on national budgets, that they are also obliged to pay for this adaptation and mitigation efforts. So that's the emission trading system. So that is something that we need to protect. Of course, it requires some kind of changes, but this sort of system also makes sure that the companies that profit from contributing to climate change also contribute to mitigating the problems that arise with the climate change. But as you said, the insurance problem is also something that we need to look at, because in some areas of economic activity, it becomes an issue that it becomes more and more straining for enterprises to insure from economic losses that are caused by climate change. So, for example, agriculture is the first thing that comes to mind. And that is also another reason why we need to think also about investing into climate policies and energy transition as a sort of insurance for us, for future generations of Poles, because if we manage to mitigate the climate change, so slow it down, then this bill stops rising as much, and it protects us from the case when some of the risks that are associated with our estimates, of course, are unfortunately turn out to be real, and maybe these costs could actually be higher than we can predict for now, because there are newer studies that show that the sensitivity of climate to concentration of CO2 could be higher than so far we have predicted, and that could cause actually that the economic losses will be much deeper than we can expect. So that's why if we try to stop climate change, then these sort of effects could be lower, and we could be insured against putting higher bills.
So extreme impact, extreme weather, but also extreme measures required, it sounds like. So this is not the end of the story. But look, thanks for coming in and sharing all that insight. Really informative stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much
Aneta
for the
Stefańczyk
invitation.
there from Reform Institute. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks, but do stay right here on TVP World for more. Goodbye.